Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Science Pill. My name is Jessica Nunez, and I'll be your host today. I'm Youth Program Manager at the Newark Museum of Art, and today I'm joined by my colleague, Mary Heller. Today's episode of Science Pill is super fun. We're going to find out how magnetic your favorite breakfast cereal is. Now, you're probably wondering how, but we're also going to talk to you a little bit about the importance of iron. In the meantime, while people join, I just want to remind you that if you're watching us on Zoom, please use the Q&A feature either located at the bottom of your screen or at the top. And we're also going to be taking questions from Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, put your questions in the chat and we'll be sure to answer them throughout. Mary's really awesome at interacting with all our guests, all our viewers as you're watching. So please submit your questions. Mary, before we get started, do you have a favorite cereal?
Oh gosh, there are so many that are good. When I was younger, the more sugar, the better. But now that I'm older, I'm like, that's a little too sweet for me. So right now, Raisin Bran Flakes, oatmeal, things like that, because it has enough sweetness to it. And with oatmeal, you can add anything. It can be sweet, it can be savory. You can do so much with that palette. So it's a great staple to have. Yeah.
Now,
What about for you?
A controversial question before I tell you my favorite cereal. Cold or hot milk in your cereal?
Actually, anymore, I've not been even using milk. I actually put yogurt in it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I put yogurt in because years ago I took a trip to Sweden, and instead of putting milk in the cereal, they have this thicker milk. It's kind of halfway between milk and yogurt. So maybe something along the lines of kefir. And you pour that in, and oh my God, I fell in love with it. And that's how I've been eating my cereal ever since. So yogurt actually instead of milk.
Try that.
Yeah.
So my favorite has to be Honey Bunches of Oats, the almond flavored one.
Yeah.
But I do get it. I think it is very sweet. And when I was younger, like a guilty pleasure even now, because I rarely ever get it, is Cocoa Puffs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. And sometimes I eat the cereal just as a snack. I'll get a little bowl, like one of my small little glass bowls here. I'll just put some cereal in there and have it as a snack if it's like a really sweet one, because then you're not getting the whole serving. So you're not getting all that sugar, but you are still getting some of the nutrients and some of the vitamins in it too. Yeah. No, that's cool.
I don't know that Cocoa Puffs has a lot of iron in it, so I don't think it'd be good for this experiment.
Well, you know what, whatever cereals you have at home, because one way you can check to see how much iron it has in it is, let me cover up the brand name here. On the panel here, it'll actually tell you the percentages of the different vitamins and minerals you have in there. So you can actually measure how much iron is in a serving. So that gives you an idea of whether or not your cereal is good for this experiment, but also what kind of vitamins and minerals you actually get from eating that cereal. Oh, and it turns out, and before we start our presentation, it turns out back in the 30s and 40s, 1930s and 40s, and when they started fortifying cereals, adding iron and other minerals into it, because a lot of people weren't getting the proper amount of minerals and vitamins to keep themselves healthy. Because think that's right after the stock market crash, that's during the Great Depression. So a lot of people were out of work and couldn't afford a lot of healthy foods. And so one of the ways to help combat the lack of vitamins and minerals people were getting is the reason why they started fortifying different foods with that. So milk being fortified with vitamin D, cereals being fortified with different minerals and vitamins. That's one of the reasons we still do that today, is to help keep people healthy so they can get the vitamins and minerals to make them healthy or to help them stay healthy.
Oh, nice. So there's a little history for you.
Yeah, there you go.
We put up that PowerPoint. So thank you again for joining us today. Make sure again to submit your questions via the Zoom Q&A feature or Facebook in the comment section.
Exactly. So yes, and the more questions, the better. Whatever questions you want to ask today, perfectly fine, and I will do my best to answer them. So let's go ahead and get started with our presentation. So we're going to be focusing on your breakfast cereals and why there's even iron in them, why we even add that in. I just talked a little bit about what they started back in the 1930s and 40s, is fortifying different foods to help us become healthier so that we can get the vitamins, minerals, and nutrients that we need to have healthy bodies. So today, we're not going to focus on all the different minerals and vitamins you can find in fortified food. We're going to focus specifically on iron and why it's an important mineral to actually get. It's an important metal to get in our bodies, because our bodies actually need iron to be able to function properly. So we're going to start with what iron actually is. So let's learn a little bit about iron. Let's go to our first information piece. Iron is an element, and that basically means it's a building block of all things in the world. So think about maybe a little toy building block you have at home. One of those can represent one piece of iron that's found in the world. To build something that's made out of iron, you need a lot of those building blocks lined up and piled up on top of each other to make something that's made out of iron. So iron is actually an element that is used to create a lot of the different things we experience in our world. Let's learn something else about iron. We know iron is magnetic. It is a metal. And when you typically think about iron, you might think of iron nails or iron filings, or perhaps something that has rusted, because things that rust are normally made out of iron and different metals that interact with water. And so what they do, what we call oxidize, which is turning into that sort of orangish rust. So iron being magnetic, we can actually find out if something is magnetic by using a magnet to see if it attaches to the object. So we're going to be learning about how magnetic my chosen cereal for today is through the experiment we're going to be doing later on. But also iron works in partnership with a lot of other things. Let's learn a little bit more about that partnership that iron has, specifically with the other element we're going to be bringing into the story today. So another building block that's called oxygen. And we probably are familiar with oxygen because it's in the air that we breathe. So let's put our picture of lungs up there. So oxygen is very important for the human body, not just so that we can breathe it in and out, but it's important inside of our bodies as well. And iron actually helps to move oxygen through our bodies so that our entire body can function properly. So let's learn a little bit about where we can find iron and how iron works with oxygen to make our bodies work better. So I bet you probably have some ideas about where iron is found, where you can find iron in your own world. We can find iron. Let's find out some of the places we can find it here. We can find iron in rocks and in dirt. So if you've ever come across a piece of rock that might be magnetic, that has iron in it. If you have ever found a meteorite that might be magnetic, more than likely that has iron in it as well. And not just on our own planet, but in our solar system, in our galaxy, and in our universe, iron is found in a lot of different places. The planet Mars, the reason that its soil is so red is because there's a lot of rusted iron in the soil, which shows us not only that Mars has iron in its soil, but also Mars had liquid water on its surface long in its past. And that iron rusted. That's what gives Mars that rusty red color. So it's found in rocks and dirt, not just here on the Earth, but on other planets as well. Let's see where else we can find iron. Okay, old metal objects like old tractors, old cars, old nails that have not had protective coatings put on them. Anything that rusts has some level of iron in it, because iron does rust. It does oxidize with the air in our atmosphere, but also with water too. That helps to break down the iron, which is what the oxidation is. We're breaking down the iron and changing it from its initial state to a different one. But then also we can find iron in the foods that we eat. So that's really where our main focus is going to be today, talking about iron in the foods that we eat and why it is so very important to our health. So let's learn a little bit more about that. So why is iron important? I already referred to iron as an element that works with oxygen to help carry oxygen through our bodies. Let's find out how it actually does that. So iron is important because it's found in a part of our blood that's called hemoglobin. And hemoglobin basically is a word that represents the red blood cells in your blood. That's why our blood is red. It's partly due to the iron that's in our blood. So what this iron is able to do is it helps to create the red blood cells that we have in our bodies. So if you get enough iron, you're going to have enough hemoglobin in your body. If you don't get enough iron, you won't have enough hemoglobin, so you'll have fewer red blood cells. So let's learn how this hemoglobin actually works with oxygen to help our bodies function and to help them be healthy. So that hemoglobin, part of that being iron, helps to carry oxygen from our lungs to different parts of our body. So oxygen just isn't important to our breathing. the oxygen is actually absorbed into our bloodstream and is carried along by the hemoglobin, which iron is a part of, throughout our entire bodies. And it's important to get that oxygen to all parts of our bodies, our fingertips, our toes, our eyes, our tongue, let's see, our knees, our ankles, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, all those parts and everything in between. It's important to have oxygen in those areas, and our blood helps to carry that oxygen, and iron is an important part of that blood. So iron is also important because we're going to learn one more thing about why it's important. It's important to get enough iron in our diet to stay healthy. There is such a thing as too little iron, which can cause health problems. There is such a thing as too much iron, which can cause other health problems. So it's good to get enough iron for our own personal selves. Now, how much iron that's supposed to be depends upon the person, because it's very important to understand that we are not all carbon copies of each other. Each of us has specific dietary needs because we don't all have the same allergies. We don't all have the same health conditions. So our diets are going to differ as we go from person to person, and how much iron you personally need is more than likely going to be different from the amount of iron that I need in my body. So when you look at the sides of cereal boxes and it tells you how much iron is in a serving, that's normally for about a 2,000 calorie diet. Not everybody needs 2,000 calories, so not everybody needs as much as what they're showing in one serving here. So if you have any questions about how much dietary iron you're supposed to be having, how many calories you're supposed to be taking in, since I'm not a medical professional, I'm not going to answer a question like that. I want you to talk to your doctors, and they might direct you towards a nutritionist who might be able to give you a better idea of how much you're supposed to be eating and of what. But it's important that we get enough iron in our diet for ourselves to stay healthy. So let's continue on. Past why iron is important, let's talk about some different forms of foods that have iron in them that can help you get those levels of iron that you need. So there's a bunch of different categories, and I'm going to tell you a few different things within each category that you can look into if you're so inclined to find out how much iron it has and how it can help you maintain a healthy body. So with our meats, organ meats like liver, that's the reason that liver has that very sort of metallic taste to it, is because of all the iron that's in it. Other organ meats like kidneys and heart and even tongue, if you're going that direction. But if you don't want to eat organ meats, beef, pork, turkey, and chicken are all good sources of iron. For fruits, dried fruits, surprisingly, have a good amount of iron in them. So like prunes, raisins, and dried apricots are really great sources of iron when we talk about our fruits. For vegetables, we can talk about tofu. We can talk about all of our leafy greens, spinach, kale, mustard greens, all have great amounts of iron in them. Peas also have iron in them too, as well as broccoli. For nuts, if you don't have a nut allergy, you can try walnuts, you can try cashews and peanuts. Those are great sources of iron. Iron's also found in legumes like beans and lentils. But today we're really going to focus on that fortified breakfast cereal because we've added some additional iron into it, or not we, but they added additional iron into it to help us get those levels of minerals and vitamins that we need to be healthy. So let's continue on. So our experiment for today is discovering how magnetic your favorite breakfast cereal is. So I'm going to use one cereal that I have here at home. It is my Bran Flakes, and I'll show you this a little bit later too when I'm a little bit bigger. I'm going to use Bran Flakes because for the Bran Flakes that I have, one serving has 100% of your daily amount of iron that you're supposed to take if you're eating a 2,000 calorie diet. So it has quite a bit of iron in it. There are a few cereals that have more iron. The more iron you have in your fortified cereal, the better this experiment is going to work. But it's up to you as to which cereals you have at home you want to actually try this experiment with. So let's go over some of the materials that we need for this experiment. So again, you want to have an iron fortified breakfast cereal. It can be anything that you have at home. You don't have to go out and buy something specific. If it doesn't have a huge amount of iron in it, go ahead and try it anyway. See what kind of different results you can get out of a cereal that doesn't have as much iron in it. So the higher the iron content, the better the experiment's going to work, but I don't want you to have to spend extra money going out to get specific cereals for this. I want you to use what you have at home. You are also going to need a bowl of some sort. So I have my little glass containers from before. You're going to need a spoon because eventually we're going to be crushing the cereal. You're going to want to get a magnet, and you're going to want one that you already have at home that's the strongest magnet that you have. And this could be like a refrigerator magnet, like the end that I have here. It could be one that you've gotten from an organization that maybe you participated in something with, or it could be one of the refrigerator magnets that you get that are decorative, or one of the ones that maybe you have, if you have alphabet letters on your refrigerator too, you can use some of those as the magnet for doing this experiment. You also want to have a white piece of paper, or you can use a handy dandy lid from one of my yogurt containers. So I'm going to use that as my base to show you how we're going to do this experiment, or at least one of the experiments. You want a resealable plastic bag, and I've already pre-filled mine halfway with water. And you're going to want some water too, because we're going to be using water in 2 different ways with this experiment today. So again, as we say every single time, let's go to our last slide here. We want you to take pictures of your experiments, share them on social media, show people how much fun you're having, but also share them with us too. So if you do post your pictures on social media, make sure to hashtag NMOA at home and NMOA Science Pill so that we can see the fun that you are having with the content that we are providing for you. So Stephen, if you want to go ahead and take away the slide show, that way I can be a little bit bigger here. First thing I want to do is I want to go over some safety rules for doing this experiment. And this is very, very important. This is an experiment that really should be done with adult supervision, because some of the magnets that we are going to be using today are fairly small. At no point should these go anywhere inside of your body. So they should not be swallowed. They should not be stuck in your ear, up your nose, anything like that. These are tools that we are using today to do our science experiments. So I don't want to hear any stories about somebody swallowing a magnet or anything like that. These, again, are tools we are using. They are not something you are supposed to put inside of your body. All right, I want to make sure that I go over that to make sure that everybody's going to be safe in doing this activity. So the first thing we are going to do is we're going to do some observations. So what I want you to do is in the chat, I want you to type in what you think is going to happen as we go through these different steps. So I have my cereal here. So I'm going to be using bran flakes. On this side, you won't be able to see it because it's very small writing, but the iron in here, there it is 18 milligrams per serving, and that's 100% of a daily value for somebody who's eating a 2,000 calorie diet. So we are going to be taking a small portion of a serving of these bran flakes, and I just put them into a small bowl here. So I'll take one of those flakes out and show it to you. There's our bran flakes we're going to be using today. So I'm going to put some of these on my yogurt lid, which is going to be my, the white paper you're going to be using, or you can use a yogurt lid too. I think the yogurt lid will work well because it has that little lip on it to keep your cereal inside so it won't go spilling out. If I take my strongest magnets that I have here at home and I put them close to these large flakes, do you think I can get those large flakes to move with just this magnet, or do you think they're going to stay still? What do you think? Go ahead and put it into the chat, either on Facebook or into our Q&A here in our Zoom session. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think the size of the flakes is going to depend upon what's going to happen? Do you think the weight of the flakes is going to depend upon what's going to happen? Is it going to have an effect? Okay, Bob thinks it's going to stay still. All right, let's see if we get some more ideas here. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to take one of these flakes. I'm going to try to angle this so I'm not moving everything up here. So I'm going to leave them down on that side. I'm going to bring my magnet. This is a fairly powerful magnet. I'm going to bring it in. Do you see them moving? They're not moving. The reason that they're not moving is not because the iron is missing. There is iron in there, but the magnetic effect that this magnet is having on it is too weak to get something as heavy as a piece of cereal like this to move. So what do we need to do to fix the situation so that we can get the piece to move? What do we need to do to this piece to make it easier for the magnetic field from those magnets to make it move? Smush them up. Exactly. We need to break them up. So what I have done ahead of time, I'm going to put these back into this bowl here. I have already ground up some of my bran flakes. You can see them in there. I don't want to pour too far because I don't want it to get on my computer here. I'm going to go ahead and pour some of those onto my plate here. And I'm going to spread them out, not only so that you can see them well, but so that we have a very thin layer. Yeah, and you're right by saying that we need to smush them up, because the lighter something is, the easier it's going to be for the magnet to attract the magnetic pieces in the cereal. So here's my magnet. I'm going to drag the magnet through the cereal and let's see what happens. I'm going to drag it through. You might not be able to see the cereal moving, but if I lift my magnet up, do you see all those little pieces of cereal on the end? I can't bring it too close to the camera, unfortunately, because it's a really powerful magnet and I don't want to ruin the computer. So, but do you see all those little pieces? If I let me put my hand down here, put my hand behind it there. You might be able to see those little pieces on the end of the magnet. That means the iron in the cereal is being attracted to that magnet. And again, I'm using a very, very iron fortified cereal. So if you use one that doesn't have as much iron, you might not get as many pieces on the end of your magnet. But also the strength of your magnet is going to have an effect on it too. The ones that I was just using are called neodymium magnets, and they are extremely powerful, and they're not something you would normally find on a refrigerator. I just happen to have some here because of some of the other science that I do. So I'm going to use a refrigerator magnet and show you the difference. So this is one of my smaller refrigerator magnets. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the magnet in. I'm going to move it around in the cereal. Now I am moving the cereal around. It's not just the magnet moving it around. And if I pick it up, it's going to be really hard for you to see, but there are little tiny pieces on the edge of the magnet there. So this is a weaker magnet. So depending upon the strength of the magnet you have, you might not be able to pick up as many pieces as I was able to do before with the neodymium magnet, because that's a stronger magnet. So this experiment, the results that you get are going to depend upon the cereal you have and how strong of a magnet you have as well. So that's one way you can show that you actually have iron in your breakfast cereal and it is magnetic, is by crushing it up. So we have little pieces. Oops, hold on. All my magnets are sticking together right now. So hold on one second. There we go. And using a stronger magnet, you can make those little pieces pick up. What if you shushed it up really fine? That's one thing you can absolutely do. To get it ground up extremely fine, you can use, you can use a spoon and you can use a bowl. You're not going to get extremely fine powder doing that though. You could use a food processor or a blender, because both of those would work in getting it ground up really, really fine, and then it would work a little bit better, because the smaller the pieces you're working with, the easier it's going to be for the weaker magnets to pick those up. All right, so that's experiment number one. So the reason that our bigger flakes couldn't move around was because the magnet wasn't strong enough to counteract the weight of the piece. So we had to crunch them up so they were smaller and lighter pieces, and then our magnet was able to pick them up. All right, so our second activity is going to be seeing if we can get a piece of cereal to move if we float it on some water. So I'm going to go ahead and put my piece of cereal in here so that it is floating. I know it's a little bit hard to see. I'm trying to figure out the angle. Maybe if we go upwards like this. This might be a little bit harder to see, but my piece of cereal, let's move it closer to the screen. There we go. Now, if it's floating, and I might need to do this really quickly. If it's floating, do you think I can get it to move with a magnet? Now it's not just sitting somewhere. It's just floating on the water. Do you think maybe the magnet could pull it with that bigger of a piece of cereal? What do you think? Okay, it might be able to move it, it might not. So let's go ahead and try and see. So I'm going to bring my magnet close in. It looks like, oh, I am pulling it a little bit and I'm not tilting. So you can get a piece that's floating to move around in a bowl of water. So again, the smaller the piece, it's going to be easier to get it to move. So if I take another piece and break it up into smaller pieces, let's get a smaller piece here. So about this size, I'm going to break that up into smaller chunks that will still float on the surface of my water. Put those in there. Bring that back up for you to see. Oops, there we go. So I have 3 of my 4 that are, oh, it's going to be really hard to see here. 3 of my 4 that are floating around there. Try to angle it. I'm not sure if you can see this well, but I can really get these to move well. So this is something you're going to have to try on your own. Break it up into smaller pieces. There we go. And these are pieces that are maybe, oh gosh, come out. Here we go. These are pieces that are very, very tiny. Let me put my water down too. So pieces that are very tiny. So you want to break up your cereal, not to where it's in a fine powder, but to where you have small, small flakes, and then use a magnet to see if you can drag them around the surface of the water. And depending upon how much iron is in them, they will move. All right, so that's number 2. There's a last one that we can do, but this one I want you to try at home. I'm going to show you how to set it up. You're going to take a serving of your bran flakes and you are going to smash them up so that you have an extremely fine powder. Again, you can do that by hand. You can use a blender. You can use a food processor. You want it into a really fine powder, and you're going to add that fine powder into a bag that is filled halfway up with warm water. Because what you want to do is you want to dissolve the cereal in the water. So I'm going to take the rest of my ground up pile here. I'm going to add in the stuff I had in my lid as well. So I put my cereal in there. You're going to seal it up. Might be good to put this inside of a bowl as you're mixing it, or maybe inside of a cookie sheet or a cake baking container, so that if it does spill, it doesn't get everywhere. You want to smush it and squish it, and you probably want to let it sit for maybe an hour or 2 so that everything can dissolve really, really well. And then what you're going to do is, once it is dissolved, you're going to lay it on its side. I'm going to be very careful so I don't get it on my computer here. You're going to take the strongest magnet that you have. Whoop, I'm trying to get my magnet off here. There we go. Oh, come on now. Hold on 1 second. That's the fun of working with magnets. They like to stick to everything. There we go. Okay. And once it's dissolved, what you're going to do is you're going to take your magnet and you're going to move it through the cereal and you're going to start dragging it upwards. So I'm not sure if you can see that. If I take it and I bring it up and then I let go, there are little particles that are coming up with my magnet. If I let it go, you can see them falling back down. So you can also pull the iron out of the cereal. So once everything has dissolved and you don't have all that material on the very bottom, you can actually pull your magnet on the outside of the bag and watch the iron move in that way too. So at least three different, let's see, 1, 2, 3 or 4 different activities you can do simply with breakfast cereal and a magnet that you have at home. All right. So those are some of the different activities we want you to try at home with your families. Again, adult supervision is so very important because depending upon the sizes of the, there we go, the magnets that you have, you want to make sure that these do not go inside the human body because that is not a place for them to be. Okay. So that gives you an idea of the different activities that we can do with these cereals. So let's bring Jessica back and see if we have any questions in our chat or off of Facebook.
Thank you, Mary. I'm really excited to try the water one with my absolute favorite.
Wait, the floating one or the one where you dissolve it?
The one where we dissolve it.
Oh, yeah.
In a Ziploc. I'm definitely going to be trying that later.
All right, cool. So what cereal are you going to do it with? What cereal? Your
I think I'm
using
honey bunches of oats. I'm looking over at the refrigerator, the Cheerios and Honey Bunches of Oats.
Oh,
So I'll check the iron content before I get started.
I would say try it with both because you never know what kind of results you're going to get.
You know, yeah, you're probably right. I should try. I should try and write down my observations. You know, I haven't done that since last year's summer camp.
Wow. Okay. Oh, speaking of which, as we're getting ready to answer some questions, as we're waiting for them to come in, do you want to talk a little bit about camp? And then I can talk a little bit about the science that we're going to be doing in camp as well.
Absolutely. So like Mary said, as we're waiting for your questions to trickle in both on Facebook and on our Zoom, we're really excited this year. We're going to be having virtual camp. And Mary, she is our science specialist. So if you sign up, you'll notice that throughout the weeks, we have several offerings, everything from making, art making, more maker, more processed, focused design thinking, more hands-on skills. And then we have science as well as music and movement and yoga. So there's a lot of really great offerings. If you're interested and if you're curious about how virtual camp might work, we're having an open house on June 20th, Saturday, June 20th. And you can find some of those details on our website and on our Facebook page. I believe it's an event. But I'm really excited. I've seen all of Mary's awesome lesson plans, and I'm really excited to see all of these experiments take place with our campers. So Mary, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
So Bob has a question here. He was wondering if they might be trying some of these experiments on the International Space Station.
They probably could do some. The only issue with this is that if we're talking about grinding down materials to a very fine powder, that is something that can get everywhere and can actually damage some of the equipment up there. And also if they're working with water, instead of staying in a container like this and conforming to the shape of the container, would actually end up in little balls floating around in space. Since they are in microgravity, that's the way that water acts. And so it might not be the safest thing for them to do this kind of experiment just kind of out in the open. If they had a closed container that they could like reach into and do the work. Oh, just a flake. Would the magnet attract it from far away? In space, more than likely, because since they are in microgravity, the weight of the flake is going to be much less than what we're experiencing here on the Earth. So you would still have to get fairly close to it with a magnet, but it is something that you could draw to yourself and would be easier to move to the magnet itself because you wouldn't have gravity fighting too much against you and the weight of the piece itself fighting against you as well. But again, to have food like this, even as a big flake floating around, there are always issues with, I know we've seen some videos with some of the astronauts playing with their food where they might squeeze it out and then they go out and then they eat it out of the little ball shapes that it forms into. They don't do that around a lot of the equipment, and they only do that in a specific area where it might be safe for them to do. But with breakfast cereal, there might be too many powdery substances for them to be able to do that, unfortunately. But it would be interesting for them to like come up with some type of activity they could do to show magnetism and how it affects objects in microgravity. So that's a good idea, Bob. So, you know, if I don't reach out to NASA, you should. So reach out to them, send them an email saying, hey, what about this kind of experiment in space? Have you done it? You know, what would happen? You know, is it a way that we can help educate more people about it too? But that's a very good idea.
Mary, could we try some of these experiments with other foods? It might be a little messier.
It might be a little bit messier. I'm trying to think. I think that the fortified breakfast cereals are probably some of the foods that have the most iron that you can actually physically remove from it. Removing iron from meat is going to be really hard to do. For vegetables, you might be able to do some of it because you could puree that up into a very sort of thin liquid and then maybe drag your magnet through it and then see what pieces it picks up. So there's always experiments to do. I just think the breakfast cereal is probably the easiest one to do, but there's no reason why you couldn't try with like peas. Tofu, I'm not sure if that would work well. But you could crush up, as long as you're not allergic, you could try crushing up some nuts and try with that too. What other ones? Beans and legumes, they might be a little bit heavy. And so maybe making like a very thin pea soup or a very thin bean soup or a very thin hummus made with a lot of water to sort of water it down. Maybe you might be able to find some things with that too. But that's a good idea, trying other types of food too that are high in iron.
Oh, nice. Okay. All right. I'm going to check our Facebook feed here.
Okay.
Give me 1 second. Mary, I know you touched upon the importance of iron for our health.
Yes.
Now, and you said, could you talk to us a little bit more about too little or too much iron?
Yeah, from what I know more about too little iron rather than too much. I don't know what like serious medical issues could be with too much, but anything that's, anything that you have that's too much is going to be a problem for the human body. Like, like having too much cholesterol or too much sugar in your body or not enough sugar in your body. We can have different medical issues because of those imbalances. So it's always best to try to get everything balanced. I mean, for a lot of people, it's really hard because again, we are not carbon copies of each other. So each of us needs a slightly different amount of different sort of minerals and such. And some people have health conditions that other people don't have, to where maybe they can't have the iron from meat. Maybe they have to get it from vegetarian sources, or maybe they need to cut down on their saturated fats because their cholesterol is too high. So the diet that you have, and not diet as in going on a diet to lose weight, more of augmenting your diet so that it's a healthier lifestyle. Your diet is really going to be based on what you nutritionally need for yourself. And again, I want to specify, talk to your medical professional, talk to a registered dietitian or nutritionist who can help you understand more of what you yourself need for your own medical needs. But I know for too little iron, you can end up with a condition called anemia, which means that you don't have enough red blood cells in your body. And so it's not carrying the oxygen through your body like it really should. And so that can cause like oxygen deprivation in certain areas of your body. So it's something that makes you feel fatigued or makes you feel tired. It's something that it's for me, sometimes I have like a little bit of anemia depending upon when it's happening. And so there are times where I just feel so exhausted. I just feel completely wiped out. And so too little can cause these sort of feelings where you're always feeling tired and, you need to be intaking a little bit more iron. But again, that is not based on just, I read this online. Talk to your medical professionals, talk to a dietitian or a nutritionist, because you really want to have those medical professionals behind you, supporting you as you're figuring out what your body specifically needs.
I think a lot of us, when we have all this time on our hands, we might do the WebMD thing and Google our symptoms.
Yeah, I do that too.
I encourage you to, you could be curious, but don't harp on it. Don't stick with that. No. Definitely do what Mary says. Yes. Reach out to a professional who would be able to help you with that type of information.
Absolutely.
Mary, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who submitted their questions. I want to remind you that we have a lot of things going on this week. Tomorrow, we have our museum crawl, and I'm going to read it because I don't want to mess it up. We're going to be exploring the treasures of the 18th century Indian palace with Giles Tillotson. He is a consultant director at the City Palace of Jaipur, so that's going to be really exciting. Tomorrow as well, later on that day, I believe we have story time live with pets at 3. Thursday, we have our lunch and learn with our artist Kambui at 1 p.m. He'll be discussing his artwork featured at the Newark Museum of Art, as well as answering questions from the public. Saturday, June 13th, we have highlights from our Norman Bloom exhibit called, this particular piece is called Bit by Bit on Saturday. And then Science Week. So Mary, I know you're really excited about Science Week. I'm really excited about Science Week. That starts next week, correct? Monday the 15th?
Yes.
Mary, could you give us a sneak preview of what that week might look like?
Oh gosh. Well, some of the things that I've been working on, I know we're going to have another Ask an Astronomer. We are going to be joined, I believe, by Mary Lou West, who is one of the professor emeritus from Montclair State University. I've known her for many, many, many years. She's a wonderful educator. She is able to communicate so many wonders of our universe to all audiences of all ages. So she's going to be talking about, I believe, the life cycles of stars and different types of stars. We're also going to be having some different activities throughout the week that are based on science. We're going to have some science quizzes. We're going to have a science bracket, which I've been working on, of some of it's like 16 of the top inventions of the past 60 years. And so you get to vote on which ones you think are the most important. So it's just like the other brackets we've been doing, but this one's going to be science-based. So lots of different aspects of science and technology we've drawn from to make that bracket. So we want your input as to which ones you think are the most important. And I'm blanking on a lot of the other things we're doing too. So
that week is to be packed.
Yeah.
Again, thank you so much, Mary, for today's awesome presentation. And I encourage all of you to sign up for the Zoom webinars. Also, if you're interested in camp, be sure to sign up. Do you see that? Zoom on the head to sign up for our open house, our virtual camp open house on June 20th. Thank you again, Mary.
One thing we didn't mention was the ages of the kids that we're doing camp for.
Yes. Thank you. So camp will run this year for ages 5 to 7 and 8 to 12, as well as teens, so 13 and up. I think that's it. I think I've covered
I think we're
everything.
good. Yeah.
Thank you so much again, Mary, for an awesome episode of Science Pill. I'll see you all soon.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.